And before you know it, we were shooting it, and I was a full-blown junkie within like a couple of months. I lost my job, having to steal and do all the dope fiend junkie behaviors. I almost died, I would say. My friend and I were pulled over by the police, and then I got kind of mixed up in the system. One of the reasons I enjoyed heroin, you could say, was because I had so much anxiety, and the heroin completely melted it away. One time I took a bunch of mushrooms and went and saw a horror movie at the theater, and that was just a
Oh
nightmarish
shit.
experience. I had taken a heroic dose, and I found myself literally meditating in front of my computer to the song Third Eye by Tool. I was like trying to open my third eye. I felt this like knot of energy. And what the spiritual awakening is when that second self starts to kind of come online and almost demand things of you.
How would you distinguish between, like, let's say, a genuine spiritual awakening and just going crazy? So it's been a while. So you're actually my first guest that I've had after quite a long hiatus of this podcast.
I know I was on your YouTube channel a few minutes ago kind of scoping it out, and I saw one of your videos mention you took a break from YouTube for a year, which I understand. So I was curious to hear about that. So yeah, well, awesome. I'm glad to be here and welcome back.
Awesome. Well, anyway, so welcome everyone. So I have Victor Oddo. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, thank you.
Oddo?
That's correct.
Yeah, dude, you're actually one of the first like OG kind of spiritual YouTubers that I used to follow like 8 years ago. Like you're one of like the first guys along with like Aaron Dowdy and like that kind of realm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a trip seeing you on screen here. Yeah,
Awesome.
so
Thanks.
I wanted to kind of start off this interview with your whole journey into like from addiction to spiritual awakening and where you are now. So from what I've seen in your videos, you were addicted to heroin and kind of went into that world. So if you
Yes.
don't mind, would you be open to kind of delving into that and like how you even got into that world?
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to, man. Um, it's interesting because when I got into heroin, you might think I'm lying, but I didn't know much about it. I wasn't actually aware of how addicting and dangerous it was. My only real education with like drugs was something called a DARE program. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's like some,
I have,
have
yes.
you? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like put on by the schools, and it's very, you know, like fear-based, and I didn't trust it. It seemed like it was over the top, you take one hit, you're going to die type of message. So I didn't trust it. So I set out to kind of draw my own conclusions. And consequently, I tried a lot of different things. I started smoking marijuana in like eighth grade, and I liked that. I enjoyed it. And I drank at a young age. And I fell in high school, I fell into like, we were known as the druggies. We did a lot of drugs. We partied a lot, took a lot of psychedelics and stuff like that. And we took pride in it. Not that that's smart or anything, but that was like my high school upbringing. And then at one point, there was this kid in high school that worked at a pharmacy, and he was able to get all these different prescription painkillers, and he flooded the whole school with like, Oxycontin, Vicodin, all that kind of stuff. Hundreds of kids were just popping these pills like
Oh
candy.
wow. Sorry to cut you off,
Yeah.
but when was this? How old were you? I mean,
I
like
was like
what year
17,
was?
18. This was like high
Okay.
school, like 11th, 12th grade.
Okay. How old are you now?
40.
Okay, so this is like okay, so a little while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, this guy got busted, right? And then everybody's sort of strung out on these painkillers. And then this one guy came along with what he called brown. He had this like sexy name for heroin. He called it brown, and I
Brown
saw all
sugar.
my friends doing it. At first, I was skeptical because I do remember the name, being kind of a serious thing. But nobody was freaking out. Nobody was having convulsions. Everyone was just kind of sitting there chilling. So I was like, whatever. So I did a line of brown. And then for like a week, it was always there, so I did it. And then after about a week, when this guy didn't come around, I realized for the first time that, oh, I don't feel right. Something's not right with me. And it was in that moment that I kind of was somewhat aware that I became a little bit physically addicted to it. And I knew right then and there it would be smart to stop, but then I didn't. I didn't take it seriously. And before you know it, we were shooting it, and I was a full-blown junkie within like a couple of months. I lost my job and was having to steal and do all the dope fiend junkie behaviors. I was in and out of rehab
Wow.
probably a half a dozen times, and that's kind of how it began.
And what was like the craziest experience that you had during that era? Because I would imagine that you would have seen a lot of like interesting characters, let's say, and a lot of crazy
Yeah,
shit that would
we
have
used to
went
go
down.
down to like downtown Detroit to to get our drugs. That was an extremely dangerous place. That was pretty. I saw some pretty nutty things there. One time though, I almost died. I would say I was using heroin, and I had almost like an overdose amount where I started to feel myself kind of like almost like I was gonna overdose. But and then but and I had one more little packet left, and for some reason it was just missing. But I would have done that packet, which is kind of interesting.
Oh
But
damn.
yeah, no real stories
What was
come to
that?
mind, honestly.
What
It
was
was a
that? What
mess.
was that feeling of like almost overdosing? Can you?
It was. I kind of said the story. It's been a long time, a bit in a mixed-up way, but I was gonna do that other one, but it was missing, and I didn't think much of it. And then later that night, I felt myself. I felt like my blood pressure really dropping. I looked in the mirror, and I just felt myself like I can't explain it, but I felt like I had way too much. I felt like I had kind of a dangerous amount in my system, basically. But if I would have done that other one, I might have. Who knows?
Damn. So did that like
Yeah.
lead you? Like, did you have like a rock bottom kind of moment that kind of, transformed your trajectory?
Yeah, I was in and out of rehab multiple times, and then finally, my friend and I were pulled over by the police, and then I got kind of mixed up in the system,
Hmm.
and then at that point, I realized I had to make a change, and then that change I decided to make was to leave my hometown because every time I would go to rehab and come out, I would just end up hanging out with the same crew and using again. So I moved down to Florida to this place called the Boca House at 18 years old. And it was there that I'm fortunate to have aligned with like the right people, people who are very serious, and I have not touched it ever since.
Hmm. What do you think helped you with that? Like, I don't know, because I kind of relate. Like, I didn't go down the heroin route, but like, I definitely did start like getting to the the drinking, the smoking weed, kind of hanging out with the degenerates, all that kind of stuff, the druggies, as you put it, when I was like maybe 13. So I kind
Mm.
of like understand that well a little bit, but yeah, it must be. It's kind of like tough to break free from those patterns, especially when you hang around with people who do it all the time, you know?
Yeah, I found that to be crucial. Changing my environment dramatically as far as my friend group, that was huge. Also, I don't know, for some reason, I just had this conviction that I never had before. I really wanted to stop. Whereas before, when I would, try to get clean, I would have a lot of like emotional challenges. Like for example, one of the reasons I enjoyed heroin, you could say, was because I had so much anxiety, and the heroin completely melted it away. But after
Hmm.
using it for about a year or so, whenever I would stop, whatever anxiety I had prior was like tenfold. And it just was very uncomfortable for me in social situations and dealing with my own emotions. So, anyway, with this conviction, I just, for some reason, had this willingness to not use no matter what, even though I would have these like dark nights of the soul and these really just challenging times emotionally where I just felt like just so depressed and defeated and anxious and like I would never become normal again. I felt like I had such a level of anxiety that it was like I could tell other people didn't feel that. It was like an abnormal amount. But I just decided I'm not going to use no matter what happens. And over time, luckily, I was able to kind of witness these sort of symptoms sort of slowly fading away. And as that was happening, my confidence started to grow, and I had started to put my energy into things like working out, and I was really into the 12-step program at the time, and I took that very seriously. So, and again, a big part of it was I had really good friends where the place I went called the Boca House had about 300 whack job, freaking junkie addict, people, gangbangers, really hardcore people. Now I was this like little like preppy kid from like the suburbs, like not really hard, not a hard ass at all. But anyway, the vast majority of these people were going out and partying and using. But I happened to align with this like these handful of people that were not like that. So we would go to the meetings together and we would support each other.
Hmm.
So a lot of it, honestly, I feel lucky. I feel like I happen to align with the right people because I know if I wouldn't have, it would have been a lot different.
Hmm. What was your like your background like? Because I don't know about for you, but for me, I think part of the reason why I kind of got attracted to that drug world was, I guess, a like kind of a dysfunctional family at home. So I needed that feeling to rebel. Was it like similar with you, or what kind of attracted you to this world in the beginning? I'm not even just heroin, but just like weed and drinking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can't blame my family. They're mainly normal. They were normal. There's no like abuse or neglect. They
Yeah,
both my parents loved me, and I knew that. They're a little bit overbearing at times, which I think is why I was a bit anxious. But not enough to justify some of the things I did. I don't know. I've always been very rebellious. Even at a young age, I would just be willing. I just wanted to try things on my own, and honestly, I kind of stumbled into it. I think just being naive and overly rebellious, I would say. And I also
mm,
liked drugs. I liked getting high at the time. I thought it was. I didn't see anything wrong with it at that time. I thought it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of good times even, but I just took it way, way too far.
yeah, fair enough. Like I don't even want to sit here and like kind of blame my family because I guess it's like that story of like, an alcoholic father has two sons and one's like turns into an alcoholic and it's like, yeah, of course I'm an alcoholic. My father was one, and the other one is like completely successful and sober, and it's like, what turned you this way? It's like, of course I turned out this way. My father was an alcoholic, so it's like, I guess it
Yeah.
depends on how you take your situation. So yeah, like I don't want to like kind of just for context, not like I had this messed up, family and upbringing and stuff like that, but I'm sure it was just maybe one factor. I think like you, it's just like I don't know what it is, but you kind of have that rebellious nature. And I'm sure the Dare
Yeah.
program kind of makes it even more like, oh, come on, it can't surely it's not that bad, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think for a lot of people it is. I think a lot of people it is that they suffered wounds as a child, and they
Mm-hmm.
just sort of discovered along the way that drugs sort of like make that pain go away, you
It's
know.
true.
So I think that is a huge influence for a lot of people, and me too. I'm sure there are other like deeper unconscious issues that were sort of soothed by the drugs, you could say, but just not like I don't have your stereotypical story of like beat by your father, alcoholic mother, that kind of thing. It's more
Yeah,
like
yeah.
no, but I do believe it is a massive influence, honestly.
Gotcha, gotcha. Do you think that I don't know if you're like connected with that world today, but like do you think that heroin use has decreased or increased since when you were growing up?
It seems to have increased. I don't know. My mom has become like a huge advocate for like helping families who have kids who are using drugs, and she's always telling me stuff. She was telling me the other day that fentanyl is a huge problem, which
Oh
there I
yeah,
guess
for
it's like
sure.
it's like laced. It's like in a lot of the other drugs these days, and it's more deadly and easier to overdose. So I don't know exactly, but it sounds to me from like the grapevine, it's gotten a lot worse. Is that correct? Do you know?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the rest of the world, but I know that like where I'm from, Melbourne, I just discovered like a few weeks ago that we're the heroin capital of this country. So we take more than
Wow.
half of all the heroin that comes in. But it's like because I'm
Whoa.
not like directly connected with this world. I don't see it, but I can definitely like I'm not surprised, but at the same time, yeah, it's just the underworld, right? Like when you're not in it, it's just not part of your reality. But yeah, it's definitely
Yeah,
there
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
And you said that you experimented with psychedelics in high school? How was that?
I did well. I had some good times and some challenging times. I didn't
Course.
like respect the power of them. So I had some beautiful times on like LSD and mushrooms, but then like in the wrong context, there was times I would take it at like a party. One time I took a bunch of mushrooms and went and saw a horror movie at the theater, and that was just a
Oh
nightmarish
shit.
experience. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so I was
Yeah, I've heard
really
a lot of
just
stories like that. I don't understand
naive
how.
with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fuck. What
But
movie
but there
was
were
it?
times even
Do you
within that
remember?
that I would what's that?
What movie was it? Did you see
It
the
was
horror
Final
movie?
Destination 2.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
But
but
yeah,
yeah,
man,
continue.
but later in life I got into them again. I would grow my own mushrooms and I would take them with completely different intentions. And to this day I'm a huge fan. I drink ayahuasca, you know, multiple times a year actually, and I still will microdose with mushrooms, and they've been an amazing tool in just my pursuit of finding happiness and balance in life on many levels. I consider them like a grand teacher almost. I didn't know it at the time when I was, in high school, but
For sure. Well, it's like your t-shirt says, they're a tool. you know?
Yeah, right. Yes. Hmm.
I read on your website and you said that you had a mushroom experience which triggered this Kundalini awakening. Was that like the beginning of your spiritual awakening?
Yeah, I had a couple of different awakening experiences throughout my day. One of them was in rehab before I understood it, but then yeah, one was during a psychedelic trip where I had taken a heroic dose. You know what a heroic dose is, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
5 grams. They were kind of weaker mushrooms. I'll just say that to be honest, but it was still a big dose. And I found myself literally meditating in front of my computer to the song Third Eye by Tool. I was like trying to open
Wow.
my third eye, rocking out to Tool. And then after the song ended, I felt this like knot of energy, almost like a softball sized, like dense knot of energy at the base of my spine. And I was like in this trance state almost, and I found myself trying to like bring it up just naturally, not really knowing, almost getting kind of caught up in the moment. And as this ball got higher and higher up my spine, it eventually pooled in my forehead, and it felt extremely like tight, and then it exploded. And then I saw this brilliant white light, and then I sort of slipped into an ego death.
Wow.
And then I thought I was dying, and I had my wife, take me to the hospital. Luckily, my friends talked me down, and they didn't let me go in. They thought I was just tripping out. But I knew something beyond just the psychedelic sort of phenomena happened to me. I didn't understand it at the time. And then, I came out of it and I thought, okay, that was one wild trip. Never had that happen before. But then that same exact energy coming up my spine started to happen while completely sober. And it was so powerful. There was times when
Wow.
I would just be sitting there doing nothing, and all of a sudden I could feel like this almost this eerie feeling, like there's a ghost behind you, that feeling that someone's watching you, that really where your skin crawls. And I would have to lay down because that energy would start just rushing up my spine and kind of gushing out my head, not in some imaginative way, but in a very physical way that was so powerful. I thought my body was going to like break apart. And that happened for about a year, off and on, these energy symptoms, among many other things. But it spawned what many people call a Kundalini awakening. I would say that particular mushroom experience.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
was it like a kind of like a intense vibration kind of thing or
Yes. Yeah. What eventually I discovered the best thing to do to cope with this like energetic waterfall, whatever it was like to lay down and let go. And when I let go, yeah, it
Mm.
was like an electrical vibrational energy coursing through my body, out of my head, kind of from my spine. But once I realized I could like let go and kind of trust it, it felt very blissful and ecstatic. It felt like almost like orgasmic in a way, but on like a spiritual level. It's hard to describe, but it was a very blissful, ecstatic sort of feeling, I would say, once I
Wow.
let it happen and didn't freak out.
Have you experimented with Kundalini yoga?
Yeah, years after that, for several years, I avoided any type of yoga because it would sort of stimulate that same energy. I already had like enough going on. There was like an overdose of it
Yeah.
almost. But after that, once things calmed down, I became Kundalini yoga, certified and started and yeah, I got really into it. To this day, I do it, kind of off and on as I want to.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've had some experience with Kundalini yoga or anything to do with like deep breath or rapid breath meditation techniques can, if you do it long enough and deep enough, they can definitely get you to, higher states. Um,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
So you do like breath work and stuff?
yeah, I kind of just stick with just the standard like Wim Hof type of breathing these days.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice, man. I do these. I also became certified in this thing called somatic release breath work, which is kind of like Wim
Oh,
Hof for
nice.
like an hour long. It's based off a holotropic breath work. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah, yeah.
mild version of that. So I'm a huge fan, and you're right. It can get you into these like higher states of consciousness big time. It's great for trauma release as well.
Yeah, just it's a good kind of just a grounding exercise, at least for me, it just kind of just resets my nervous system. And because I noticed that like when I like I don't know, maybe I'll have to kind of I guess measure how I'm sleeping, but I feel like I breathe really shallow when I sleep. And so it's like I got to get those
Ah,
deep breaths in the morning. I don't know what that's about. So if you have any
Yeah.
tips or tricks about
No,
that.
I'm the same, man. My mom
Yeah.
smoked when she was pregnant, so I have like a mild asthma. I do Wim Hof every morning as well. I start my morning with like a cold shower and Wim Hof in front of
Yeah.
like the red light therapy thing. Um, and even though I do Wim Hof every day, I still like have crap. My breathing is kind of sucky. I don't breathe very well. It's very shallow as well. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, like I want to get in a perfect world, I would love to get to the point where I can just deep breathe unconsciously. Because I feel like if I don't put my conscious awareness on my breathing, it's like, oh man, I'm breathing really shallow, like halfway, you know?
yeah. Honestly, I think most people are like that. I think it's honest and self-aware of you to say that. Most people, I think, would like to think they're relaxed, but no, very few people are actually, I think, relaxed enough to have like these nice deep Buddha breaths naturally. Most of us
Yeah,
are pretty
exactly.
uptight, in our
That's why
heads, that kind of thing.
I gotta remind myself. Like I have at least 50 times every day where I'm like, oh, I have to consciously, oh wait, breathe deep, get the diaphragm, like get that full tank of oxygen kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to talk about the spiritual awakening. Like, what does that even mean for those listening at home who have no idea? Like, what is a spiritual awakening? Because as I'm sure there are many layers to it, but how would you define this?
It's hard to define, honestly, but I would say in my experience for me, and it's like the best name I have for what happened to me, which is kind of like reminds me of Carl Jung. He's like a Swiss
Yeah,
psychologist.
big
He would
fan of
talk
Carl Jung.
about Yeah, he would talk about his second self, which is like your primordial essence, your soul, but not in a spiritual sense, but like your general essence that's not tampered with personality and conditioning, that kind of things. Um, I would say a spiritual awakening is when that second self starts to kind of come online and almost demand things of you, like your spirit, your inner being starts to be almost like awaken within you. And the way it's experienced, I would say, is an awareness that certain things in your life feel like they fit and certain things don't. And a lot of
Mm,
times, those things that don't are big things like relationships, careers, your entire life circumstance. All of a sudden, you start to see it differently and realize this is not authentic. This is not really where I want to be. And that sort of contrast tends to take people on this journey. Joseph Campbell calls it like the hero's
the
journey,
hero's
where you
journey.
go to try to find yourself, happiness, enlightenment, that kind of thing. And through that journey, there's a whole bunch of twists and turns. But for me, I would say it was a combination of those physical symptoms I mentioned with the Kundalini, but also my just starting to realize I'm seeing life differently, seeing myself differently, yearning for something deeper, yearning for more purpose, more meaning, more depth. And that yearning sort of caused me to make a lot of changes and sort of almost like let my inner being, guide me through life more so. Whereas before that, I would just kind of like probably run more so by my conditioning. I know that was
Mm.
freaking confusing as hell. I didn't mean for it to sound like
No,
that,
no,
but
no, no,
it's
no.
kind
It
of a
makes
hard one to
perfect sense.
answer, honestly.
It is. So you would say, but you would say it's like it's a constant process. It's not just like you have one spiritual awakening and then you're just a completely
No,
new
I think
person.
I think some people have like an awakening experience where you realize there's more to life. You become aware that
Mm,
there's other part of you, the soul, if you will, for lack of a better term. But no, it's like an ongoing, for me, it's an ongoing process of just self-discovery, healing, awareness of more and more conditioning. There's a lot of depth to how conditioned I am and how dysfunctional I am, how influenced by mom and dad and society I am. And just through this dawning of awareness, I can start to do things differently and live, slightly more and more consciously as the days go on. But no, it's not for me. I wouldn't say it's done. It's like it seems like it's going to be it's like a maturation process. I think that maybe last a lifetime at least.
yeah, for sure. I think like what you said even before about uh like sometimes your life like you have your second soul or whatever you want to call it and it's demands certain things of you. And because you're in a certain situation in life that's like it wants you to transition into something else. Like maybe, yeah, like you said, you want to you should change career or maybe leave a toxic relationship or do something greater. But I think that a lot of us, and myself included, throughout my life, like we kind of tend to numb these sensations, like with drugs or scrolling or TikTok or whatever it is. And then instead of like allowing that kind of pain to seep through and sit with it so you can process it, let go, and kind of
Yes.
use that to transmute into a different reality, which is hard
Yeah.
sometimes, man. That's like the whole dark night of the soul.
That's why I think people react, and me included, the way I resist a
Mm.
lot. I don't just flow effortlessly with my healing process. I resist a good amount of the time. Once in a while, I can let go and go into it, but it is not easy at all. There's a reason I think we suppressed it in the first place, whatever it is. Like, yeah, like with that dawning of consciousness also comes with the baggage. It's like it comes together, and really can't have one without the other. So it's no wonder why many people have completely suppressed it altogether, or you know, do as the things you said. It is very difficult to like go into the feelings that you've at one point decided were
Mm.
and not tolerable.
What how would you distinguish between, like, let's say, a genuine spiritual awakening and just going crazy? Would you distinguish these two things?
I don't know. I don't know if I would be able to. I think there's a lot of parallels I think it's kind of a fine line. I think some people who are considered crazy might be just sort of traumatized. And, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, and he talks about this. He talks about when we experience trauma as a young child, and we encounter an experience that's too much to metabolize, the way he puts it. A lot of us, because we can't leave, we're little kids, we're kind of stuck in it, an abusive parent as an example. Part
Mm.
of our psyche sort of splits off and vacates, and he calls it disassociation. And this disassociation allows you to your consciousness, part of it anyway, to kind of like not be in such pain. But in doing so, it kind of opened you up to like what he calls the archetypal realms, what we would call like the spirit world. So I
Mm.
think a lot of times crazy is someone who's been traumatized, who is sort of disassociated big time, but you can kind of very easily get lost in it. Even throughout my own awakening, and I've seen it with people where you're going through a spiritual awakening, but you start to go a little freaking crazy as well because you don't know how to ground it in. You don't know what the hell's happening to you. It's this other like reality that's all of a sudden in your experience, and you don't know what to make of it. So,
Mm.
with that said, I'm sure there are people with like chemical imbalances and things like that, but I bet like schizophrenics in particular are severely disassociated, and maybe under the right a different circumstance could maybe be alleviated in a different way. But I don't know. I'm just speculating. I'm not a psychologist. This is my
Yeah,
own
yeah.
opinion, I would say. What do you
Nah,
think?
I feel you, because I think that because I've had these similar experiences, like with the I had like a really gnarly psychedelic trip which triggered this like really intense dark night of the soul, and it was just like, yeah, very dissociated, and I was very kind of tapped into that collective suffering of humanity, and just like overly sensitive to everything. It was too much, overwhelming. And I think for some people, maybe it becomes difficult to integrate because maybe they don't have the right people around them, or they're abusing their body with the wrong types of food, or maybe they keep doing other kind of drugs, which doesn't make the healing process smoother and stuff like that. Like, there's so many factors, and I don't know, because life can seem a lot like crazy at first, especially when it's just a very novel idea, you know?
Yeah.
But it does seem to me, I guess it's hard to know in the moment. I just kind of judge it based on, I don't know, I guess later down the track, because some people, they have this spiritual awakening, and yes, they may go kind of crazy in the moment, but then you see the gains later. Whereas I see other people who go down on a downward spiral, right? They get mentally ill and they have this kind of crazy spiritual experience and they think they're Jesus, but then you see them a few years
Yeah.
later and they're like, they're in a objectively worse place than what they were before. And yeah, honestly, I don't know how to answer the question. It's just really exploring these kind of
Yeah.
topics, but yeah, it's difficult
That's
to say,
honestly
man.
why I started doing what I do, which is basically share about the awakening process. Because I thought the same thing. When I had, after that Kundalini awakening, I went to the doctor and I got put on bipolar medication, and I didn't know what to do with it.
Oh,
There was
really?
something happening with me that was like unexplainable. I thought I thought I had some kind of psychological thing initially. And then the Western sort of approach made it worse. And so I can see where a lot of people, we haven't been sort of, no one explained to us that this experience can happen. And if it happens, what to do with it. I think a lot of people, when it happens, this is what I see kind of a lot in my sort of in the spiritual community, you could say people have an awakening experience like you described, and then they want more of it. So they keep taking more psychedelics and doing more
Hmm.
meditation. and getting more and more and more and more sort of blasted off. When I think the name of the game a lot of times when you feel the way you explained is to kind of ground in, take a break, let it kind of settle down so you can integrate it. I think people aren't just, they become too ungrounded and then just sort of, yeah, disconnected from reality, and it's unfortunate. But
Yeah,
it's I can understand. I've had many times throughout my last 20 years where I could see where if I, I could see where I could have easily slipped and went in the other direction.
oh, for sure, for sure. Reality can be very slippery that way. And like you said,
Yeah.
especially if you already have a big experience and you just jump into another one, then jump into another one instead of having like a
Yeah.
long break. Like Carl Jung, bring up the great Carl Jung, he said, beware of unearned wisdom, right? So when you go into
Yeah,
that
nice.
space to like you don't have the right foundation, and then you just keep jumping back in, keep jumping back in prematurely, then that's yeah, I've seen it. I've seen people go kind of I don't even want to label crazy, but I've seen them go on a downward spiral, and it's not pretty what happens afterwards, especially
Yeah.
when they're mixing that with, drinking alcohol and eating like crap and all this kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, for
Um
sure.
yeah, so this spiritual awakening, where do you think we are in terms of the collective awakening?
Yeah, I can only speculate. I don't claim to know, but from my observation, for what it's worth, I would say it seems there are a lot of people who are making, almost unprecedented strides in their spiritual growth. And then there are then I think a lot of other people are either staying the same or if anything devolving, being more kind of like what we were just talking about. I think maybe there's like this change happening, and some people are like using it to like catalyze personal growth, and other people are being kind of consumed by it. The
Mm,
fear and the upheaval, and I do think it takes a lot less positivity to outweigh the negativity. So I think even though on the surface, what you see is maybe the majority of human beings sort of suffering and so forth, I think I don't think we need as many, people on the right path, so to speak, as you might think. So I do have an optimistic viewpoint, contrary to how things look. My hope is that humans are going to learn from what they're seeing, the wars, the chaos. I think that we have it in us to, I think we need to evolve basically. I think we kind of need to wake up and evolve for this sort of dance we're doing on planet Earth to continue much longer. But I have hopes it will, and I'm going to do my part by just sharing my messages and doing what I can. And um, well, I guess we'll have to see. I also, one thing I'll notice is like the young kids, a lot of the young kids seem to be of a higher consciousness, So I think the more and more this planet is filled with these younger generations, that might also make some big changes that are kind of hard to anticipate as well. What do you feel?
yeah, that's true. I think because I've met a lot of like, kind of Gen Z kids, like people who are like 19, early 20s, and they're like so switched on. They know so much about, they're already on this like Carl Jung, spirituality, mysticism, and religion and history and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of go back when I was 19. Dude, I didn't know
Yeah.
any of this shit. Like, I mean, like, I got to give myself some credit, but I was really just into pop culture and getting, smoking weed and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool to see that there's just, I guess it's just the nature of the internet as well. Just the amount of knowledge and yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know because I can kind of see from both perspectives on how the world is kind of going into a darker place, but maybe this is just a collective dark night of the soul, and it's just part of the evolutionary process. And then there's AI, which is a whole rabbit hole. Maybe we'll be end up bowing down to our AI overlords. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I also think there's pockets like I think like even though I think there's the opportunity to live a kick-ass life right now. Well, even though like
Absolutely.
collectively, if you were to like judge it, it would be like not looking good. I think within that there's the individual freedoms to ascend, if you will, to really make something out of their lives in spite of that. And even though there might be a lot of crazy shit going on parallel, I think you can have these little pockets of, at least that's how I feel. I feel like I'm in a good little bubble that I've created for myself by listening to my inner being over the last, 10 or so years. And reminds me of like during like I won't say the word, but we all know when that sort of disease hit the planet. You know, everybody was freaking out and it was this and that. But
Oh,
me and like
dude.
all my YouTube buddies, we went and chilled in Sedona, Arizona, where it was like pretty laissez-faire with all the rules. You didn't have to wear a mask or anything. And everybody was like suffering. But we lived this like kick-ass little reality, even though the world was kind of going to hell in a handbasket. So I do believe there that, again, there's an opportunity to live a good life, even no matter what happens
For
on the planet.
sure. Yeah, I completely believe that you can create that for yourself, and that, that 2020 thing that shall not be named. I also like that kind of reminded me like, oh shit, I need to like prepare next time so I can build that bubble for myself. Because I actually in Melbourne, we had the longest lockdown in the world. I think tied with
Wow,
North
really?
Korea. Yeah, it was like really, really bad. But I remember like looking at outside my house and you see this swing set and it's like closed with chains with the sign closed for your health and safety. Like it was insane. Like we don't have to like get too much into that, but it was a reminder of like, okay, I need to build my reality in a way so if something like this happens, you can. Because I know a lot of people who like thrive during those periods, and a lot of people who like, who suffered immensely. So I think it's like how you set up your life. And I think a lot of it has to do with your mindset and perspective and who you hang out with and the information that you're putting inside your mind, which kind of recreates your reality in this feedback loop. So
Yeah. And then also the attitude, like whatever
yeah.
you like, I feel like if you had a rougher experience, I bet you learned a bunch of stuff about life and yourself. So I feel like there's
Oh, for
value in
sure.
everything. Like, it's not like I'm always not I have my own challenges in other times, but I think a lot of people they let them weigh on them instead of using them as like a catalyst for how can I improve things? Like you're asking questions. How can I set up my reality differently for next time? Where many people are like, oh, screw it. The government's in control. Bullshit. It's just your attitude. So if you have an empowered attitude, I think no matter what happens, you can bounce off it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like because with every negative opportunity, like I don't know, like it depends on how your mindset is. I think that's everything. Because like, I know people who lose their mind over like someone cutting them off in traffic. And then I have like
Yeah.
one of my best friends who just got diagnosed with cancer recently, and his mindset is like so like inspirational. Like he's like, yeah, I'll get through this.
Wow.
And you know what? If I don't, I've had an amazing life. Like I'm good. Like I couldn't even believe that he got those news. You know what I mean? Like just the contrast of like this
Yeah.
really harsh experience versus like nothing. And people like lose their crap over it. So
Yeah.
your mind is
Absolutely.
everything, man. That's why I think that it's like a war of your mind in a lot of ways. Uh,
For sure.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
spiritual warfare, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
So, do you have any tips for people, let's say, listening right now, who are currently in this dark night of the soul? What tips and tricks would you give them to smoothen out the ride and get the most out of it?
Yeah, I think that's the key right there is making the most of it. I think suffering can be, and oftentimes is one of our greatest teachers, spiritual teachers, if you will. And I think a lot of times when people are in like what the dark night of the soul, they just want to get out of it. How can I end this? And it's when I was going through it, I go through it sometimes. It's not like a one-time thing. It's like, what am I learning from this? What am I gaining from this? What changes can I make from this? And I think, what's coming up for me? Let's go into that. Where does it come from? Oh, pain from childhood, diet. I think it's about making the most of it, about understanding the purpose of it. I think there's a purpose to the dark night of the soul, and it's like it can be a catalyst just as dark as it can get. I think it can sort of spring you up in a positive way,
Mm,
in all ways, like in your happiness and your life situation, your health even. So my advice to people who are in it would be to trust it, to trust it. When I went through these different things, it's like there was also a sense that it's happening for a reason, and I hung on to that as best I could, and really believe that there's some good that will eventually come out of it, and it always did when I had that type of attitude, rather than like how can I end it? This sucks. This is victim sort of mentality. You got to be really keen to like not let that enter your mind. Um,
mm,
is to
take the
trust would be
responsibility.
my number
Yeah,
one piece of advice is to trust.
trust. And what about those who are like, it's so overwhelming that it's like, let go. How? It's too much. How am I supposed to let
Yeah,
go?
I get it. I've had so many freakouts, man. One time when I was like going through one of my dark nights of the soul, and basically for me it was like a collapsing of my whole life circumstance, my job, my career, we were gonna move, and I had like no money coming in, a family to support, and I was trusting my spirit, and life just got worse and worse and worse. I was in financial credit card debt and no hope in sight. And one time I found myself in my basement just punching the cement like a psycho. I was just in such angst. I was so pissed off.
When was
And
this?
then
How
what's
many
that? That
years
was
ago?
like back in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. And after that, I felt so stupid after punching the ground because my hand was all jacked up. I took a folding chair and I launched it across the basement, and it burst this freaking pipe, and water was spewing everywhere. And it was like, so my point is like, it's okay to, I think, to have these freak out moments. I'm not saying always just be, oh, trust. It's like, no, no. I have my little tantrums as well, but I always will eventually come back and say, what can I do with this? So I would say for the people who are like in anguish, don't beat yourselves up. It's understandable. It can be fun. It can be
Mm,
hard, but you can't linger there. You can't remain. You can't let it. You have to eventually come up like a bobber and look around and say, what can I do with this? You know, even if those moments are few and far between, you only need a few to really turn that situation into a positive one. And I think a lot of people, they judge themselves. I'm thinking negatively. I'm in this negative state. And I think a lot of the intensification comes from the experience itself, but also the judgment. Like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's like, okay, it's hard sometimes. So be gentle with yourself, support yourself would be my advice for those folks.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I kind of, it's not that hard for me to kind of fall into that self-loathing, self-critical kind of thing. So I completely, uh, yeah, I relate with that for sure. It can be difficult, especially when you think you're kind of going backwards in life, or you're stagnant, or maybe you think that you should be further than what you are, and then everything kind of falls apart. Kind of going through those big transitions in life. And
Yeah.
during it sucks, right? Then all this kind of old negative thought patterns kind of rise to the surface, but then like anything, like, if I was to look back on like all my harshest, most deepest suffering moments in life, like years ago, you think, oh man, thank God that happened because it led to this, and this, kind of
Yeah.
shedding off those layers. And I guess, I don't know if it becomes easier, but I guess it kind of does in a way, just because you recognize patterns. So these kind of transitory moments in life, they come and you're like, okay, I've kind of gone through similar things in the past. I'm sure that there is some lesson here. There's some positive, there's always some good that you can extract from every moment.
Yeah. I think so. That's what I've learned going through that a few times in my life. The transitions, the upgrades, if you will, usually initially come about in like a spiritual crisis mixed with a bunch of life challenges, mixed with bad coping skills because you're so miserable. You relapse into the negative patterns and scrolling on Instagram and eating fucking ice cream and smoking too much weed, whatever it is, and you're like, man, I was way better like 6 months ago. What the hell's going on? But it's like I found that it's just like it's part of the transition, unfortunately. And then usually it's like this sort of circumstance sparks like a different way of thinking about yourself or life, and then opportunities can kind of come. It's like almost like we have to be shaken loose of our like patterns and our like autopilot thinking to be open to the what's possible. For
Mm,
me, it's like it always goes that way where it seems like I'm regressing, but then there's like a little gem, a little, even one freaking thought, one idea that lifts me up out of it, and then I look down and say, "Oh, thank God," and I can see why that all had to happen that way. But yeah, it's like when you go for that, like the first one or two times, it's like it's hard to have that trust. I've had that trust because I've gone through these transitions probably several times in my life, and they've always kind of taken on that pattern. So now I
mm.
try to associate it with something awesome is on the horizon, you know?
Oh, for sure. Like, even I remember my first like really hardcore Dark Night of the Soul. I was just like, nah, screw all of this. Screw spirituality, screw psychedelics. Like all this shit led me here. I don't want nothing to do
Yeah.
with it. Kind of like, you're like, if I'm here right now, obviously all my life choices led me here. So I'm like, I must have done something wrong. But then you look back and it's like, oh, actually, no, that was actually a kind of a spiritual warrior initiation kind of thing. you know,
Yeah, like a rite of
builds
passage.
character.
Exactly. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So, well, like,
And
what
I feel
kind of
like
thing?
that's
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I feel like that type of experience is like I almost like it when people tell me they're having that, because to me, a lot of people I think avoid that type of experience in exchange for like a dull, numb, almost
Mm,
like a somnambulistic, just almost like they're like not even awake. They're like zombies almost. And but they're not in acute pain and suffering, but they're unhappy, unfulfilled, discontent, you know. So I think the people that are willing to go in these dark places, and they're fucking dark, it's definitely harder compared to like, you know, zoning out on Netflix. Um, that's where I think that's where the real growth is. That's where the wisdom comes. That's why people like you can share on you know, a lot of the what you probably share has come from your challenges and the things you've
mm.
learned from it. So people, these folks become like these light bearers in a way. Um, so yeah, I feel like even though the suffering initially is way more intense than the latter, or the former rather, it leads to much more positive states, and also the ability to like help your fellow brother and sister up, you know.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And then you don't get as upset from like little, I don't know, just like trivial shit. You know what I mean? Like things that used to upset me now is like you kind of laugh about it. Like that's so funny that this
Yeah,
used to like genuinely trigger me. And now it's just you
I
can
know.
just make a joke out of everything kind of thing.
Yeah, do you ever see you ever watch the show Vikings?
No, I haven't yet, but I've heard
Oh, it's a
great
badass
things.
show.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
real quick, anyway, there's this character Bjorn. He's like the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, with this badass Viking like hero. And his son, you know, you watch him for the first couple of seasons coming of age, and he's like this little boy, like 10 years old for a time, wanting to go into battle, and you know, no, you're too young kind of thing. But eventually he turns like probably 20, 21 years old, and he insists on going off into the woods in like the dead of winter, which is very dangerous. And he just decides to go in the woods. His mom and dad are like, man, that's not smart. You might die. And he's like, he needed to prove it to himself. And in the woods, he ends up fighting a bear and weathering all these crazy ass obstacles. But when he comes back from that place, he's got this like look in his eye, this like look of like he grew up during that time.
Mm.
And I think that's not going to happen reading a blog article online. That's not going to happen just in your safe little life. So I think we sometimes bring about these like really hard challenges to kind of like show us, give us this like metamorphosis that sort of Bjorn went through. So anyway, I'm
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
regurgitating what we just said, but I thought that
No,
was a
no,
kind
no,
of
no.
fun analogy.
Thank you for sharing that story. Like, yeah, I gotta watch that show. But like, I think like, yeah, like I think these experiences, Dark Night of the Souls, kind of get forced upon us in a way because if they didn't, I'd just be stuck in this shitty little bubble and I'm just numbing myself, getting nowhere, you know? It's not like
Yeah.
I got drafted for war and, you know, it's like 100 years ago when we went through a lot more harsher kind of situations, you know? I think we have, and I can't speak for the whole world, of course, but for myself anyway, I had a very kind of cushy life. So maybe that's just the
Yeah.
way of your soul kind of bringing on these kind of hero journey moments where it forces
Maybe.
you
Yeah.
to,
That's what I think, but you never can know, obviously, but it seems that way sometimes.
yeah, for sure. Like, would you kind of recommend any other things to kind of help with the dark night of the soul? Like outside of just like the mindset of accepting itself, but like, you know, like maybe certain exercises or meditation techniques or foods to eat, things like that, like more practical things to just kind of help with that moment or therapy or whatever it is.
Yeah. I say a lot of times in my experience working with people who have gone through it, what does sort of end it, which usually is temporary because it's just an ongoing thing, is a lot of times there's something they're avoiding doing. There's like something they
Mm,
like know in their heart they should do, or should stop doing, or something, a change they should make. And a lot of times it's like the dark night lingers because they're coming to terms with what they know they need to do. So a lot of times it's like, what do you need to do? What are you feeling called to do? Do it. The sooner the better. But in the meantime, I think having compassion for yourself is a big thing. And I feel like any technique can, you know, anything that can snap you out of the negative thinking is helpful. Like one of the times when I went through it intensely, I would go on a walk every day with my family, my wife and the kids. And even in the winter, we just freaking go out there and walk. And being on the walk, getting myself out of my head, moving my body, anything that moves your body, I think can get you into like a more elevated state of awareness where it's more possible to trust and to have faith and that kind of thing. So
Mm.
I think it's important to, like, I've always had a routine, whether it's meditation or breath work or walking. And even though that would be temporary, I'd slip into the negativity a few hours later or less. But I would make myself do shit like that every day, whatever works for the individual, I would say. But you can't just expect to pop out of it. You almost got to like do something that has proven to help you feel better, and like make yourself do that as much as you can. And a lot of times you do have to make yourself do it because in those negative states, you don't want to do anything. You're kind of like locked in this sort of
Mm.
like vortex, but you got to like put on the jacket and go outside, go for a
Yeah,
walk.
yeah.
Kind of
Stuck in
thing.
limbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, movement helps for sure, for sure. And I've noticed even like when I've had psychedelic ceremonies like Wachuma, like San Pedro and
Mm.
stuff, and like ceremonies where, I've had the ceremonies where you kind of sit in a circle and you stare at a fire all night, and then the ones where you're moving up a mountain, and I
Yeah.
noticed that the ones where you're sitting in a circle, like there's no, you know, right or wrong. One's it's more of a yin yang sort of duality. But I noticed that when you're sitting in the same spot, and especially if you're having negative thoughts, it just grows and amplifies, you know what I mean? It's like a still lake
Yeah.
versus a flowing river. Whereas when you're moving in the mountain, even if something challenging comes, you're like, okay, it comes and goes, comes and goes, because you're moving, getting that energy flow. So
For sure.
yeah.
Especially with Wachuma. I find it extremely difficult to sit still on Wachuma.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot
Yeah,
of
I just
times
I
what
just want to
helps is
walk,
like,
Yeah,
yeah, or
explore nature.
talk. A lot of times
Yeah,
my breakthroughs come from just conversation. Like I'll have a feeling of something coming up, then I'll just start discussing it and I'll feel it move. So yeah, I like that analogy.
yeah, no, because I feel like for me anyway, like or how it's taught in the shamanic traditions is that Wachuma is more of a kind of masculine grandfather type of energy, and I
Yes.
feel that. I feel that, especially compared to ayahuasca. So while we're here, actually, how was your
Mhm.
Wachuma experience? Like, how did you uh discover the San Pedro cactus, and how was that experience for you? And how'd that affect the
Well,
trajectory of your life?
yeah, I would say like 5 or 6 years ago, I was invited to this retreat center to drink ayahuasca in exchange for making like some YouTube videos about it. And that was like my first taste of like my first time doing ayahuasca, which I was very impressed, but also humbled. It was a really big experience for me. And that led me to like seeking out local circles. This was in Costa Rica where I went. I lived in Vegas at the time. And I found that there was like people doing ceremonies in my local area. And those folks would do ayahuasca for a couple of nights and then San Pedro the third day. And then that
Mm.
was like my introduction into the San Pedro. And I like them both. I'm a huge fan of both. And I've done both many, many times, always taking something very valuable, whether it's healing or just awareness or insight or whatever. I have a lot of like reverence and respect for both those plant teachers for sure.
Yeah, Wachuma is like definitely a powerful medicine when used correctly. It was actually the one that told me straight up to start a YouTube channel. It's like I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. I don't know. I'm kind of bad with keeping track of time, but yeah, it was just really. I just love the kind of the yang masculine kind of just exploring out in nature. So
Yeah. It's a lot more direct. The ayahuasca can be kind of like tricky and
yeah,
confusing and just very feminine and amazing in its own right. But the Wachuma is
exactly.
more like if it just straight up says something, you can kind of take it verbatim. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I'll start the YouTube channel.
Exactly. Ayahuasca
There's
is
no
like
there's no
my
like
yeah.
nothing to decode within that.
Reminds me of my wife.
Yeah. Say,
So what have been like your biggest kind of inspirations? Like any books that come to mind that have I guess impacted your way of thinking?
yeah, there's been a lot. A lot of times it's like the timing of my life. Like I remember a
Mm.
book that really made an impact on me was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Have you ever
Yes.
heard that one? That's
Yeah, I read
amazing.
that
Just
when I
about,
during my Dark Night of the Soul, so yeah.
yeah. That's like a case in point to what we were discussing earlier, how you can like transcend suffering and turn it into something positive. Um, I'm a big fan of like like your different like teachers like Eckhart Tolle, Adishanti, people like that, like your spiritual teachers like that. They've been, in fact, I'm reading The Power Now again, currently. Also, the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'm a big fan of him. Have you read any of his stuff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of Stoicism for
Yeah,
sure.
whole bunch of stuff. It depends on the time. When I was building my business, I was into like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and like Outwitting the Devil, those kind of books.
Oh, that's a
Um,
great one. Outwitting the Devil. I
that's
love
a
that.
solid one, right? I always recommend that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, true. It depends on the phase. Yeah, I'm kind of
What
a
about you?
sim
What are some of your favorite reads?
Oh, yeah, similar, but actually Para now I read on when I first did ayahuasca, which is kind of my biggest spiritual awakening phase. I don't even say biggest, but yeah, one of the more powerful ones, memorable ones. And yeah, the Kabbalion is always up there for sure. Yeah,
What is that? The Kabbalah?
the Kabbalion, the which is
Ah,
Hermeticism, the
okay,
seven
nice. I've
Hermetic
not
laws
gotten
and
into
stuff.
that.
Oh man,
Cool.
dude, I'd highly recommend. Really good. And
Okay.
yeah, it just depends because sometimes I'll go like real mystical and occult. A few years ago, I kind of for the first time started exploring like the Bible and Christianity and stuff like that. And then get into Buddhism. And yeah, it just depends on the phase. And because I
Same.
think there's
It's
value
hard
for
to
all
pick
of
like
it.
one book. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
depending on the
exactly.
season. I'm like you. I just sort of go oscillate around based on what I'm interested in at the time, and it can vary.
Yeah, but I think the ones that have stand the test of time, I think like the Tao Te Ching has been really useful for me. So.
Awesome.
Highly recommended. Just like kind of the timeless wisdom books where it doesn't matter at which phase of your life you read it and you always get something different out of it.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely. Yes.
I like those ones. And
Yeah, and you're into music too a lot. You're really into music as well, right?
oh yeah, yeah, I started playing I got into like piano when I was like yeah, 9, 10 years old and started learning guitar when I was like 13. Then I was got like really heavy into
Nice.
metal, joined a metal band and yeah, man, love it. Definitely
Awesome,
been
bro.
a
Yeah.
great yeah, during that 2020 thing, actually, that's when I started kind of getting into music production because I was like, oh, I have all this extra time on my hands, so I'm just going to learn this new software editing system. And then I just made a whole bunch of music, and I'm like, oh, cool. Now I've got like all this music I can use for like background music for my own videos, so I never have to worry about copyright and stuff like that. And it gives it more of that distinct, authentic feel as well. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Good for you. Yeah, music for me is like a rock show is like a religious experience many times. That to me is
oh,
like going to church.
absolutely.
And many people would look at it like, oh, this is just intense and low vibe, but not for me. Not for me. It really invokes so much passion and so forth. So I'm a
Yeah,
big fan as well.
I kind of almost see like like a ceremony in a lot of ways, and especially in the metal community, like yeah, it's kind of like very, especially from the outside, and if you don't understand it, which I'm sure similar attitude of how people look at psychedelics from the outside. Like
Yeah.
with metal, it's like it seems very aggressive, and like it is for sure, but at the same time, there's like a brotherhood kind of mentality, like when there's a mosh pit, if someone falls down, like everyone will stop and pick them up and it's like a
Yeah.
very beautiful outlet, when done in the right way. Like I remember I teared through multiple metal shows, like seeing Metallica live, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
listening to Fade to Black, like that one still gets me with the goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's an art form. It's like, you know, it's I think the transcendent realms, if you will, are not just all positive. It's in both. So I think I like dark heavier music because it like sings, it acknowledges the challenging aspects of life and it creates them into this like beautiful like thing that we can like relate with and not feel alone. So there's a lot of positive results from it, as well as the cool brotherhood as well. I've noticed that as well at like metal concerts and stuff like Metallica in particular.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think we should be so afraid of kind of delving into the shadow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I noticed that in certain and maybe I've fallen into this trap before in the past. I don't know about you, but kind of fallen into this toxic positivity trap where like you try to avoid anything that's like low vibration or bad or that,
Right.
that kind of stuff. And then you become judgmental and have this kind of spiritual ego kind of thing. I don't
Yep.
know if that's like that happens to everyone on this journey, but definitely did for me. And I kind of notice a lot of people as well.
Yeah, me too, big time. And then life humbled the fuck out of me, and I was like,
Yeah,
okay, you got some work to do, buddy.
exactly.
You're not,
God slap the fuck out of you. Just
Yeah.
humble yourself, boy. Exactly. Um, actually, I want to ask this kind of like a weird question that kind of came up with, but what's like the weirdest, most bizarre thing that you've done in the name of spirituality and or personal growth? You know, like you're drinking piss or injecting frog venom or stuff like that,
Oh
or
God, it's a little
whatever.
embarrassing. I really wholeheartedly believed the entire planet was going to ascend into the fifth dimension in 2012. So because of that, I sold my house and I moved my family into a travel trailer and we rented this badass house in Florida on the beach, thinking money was not going to be an issue come
Mhm.
2013. I really believed. So I burned all my bridges, had no job, lived like a rock star for about a year, only to wake up in 2013, December 22nd rather, broke in some shitty apartment, um, feeling like a complete idiot. So that was how that's one of my embarrassing stories.
I thought that well was gonna end too. I remember that. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because your older videos, you were traveling around in like a RV or something.
Yeah, and that was the second time. We've done that twice, moved into an RV. But the first time it
Ah,
was,
okay,
I thought
gotcha.
we were going to ascend. The second time was more so as a means of, you know, building my business and that kind of thing.
Yeah, nice. So you into like kind of any health kind of trends and stuff like that? I don't know, just like kind of weird
Yeah,
out of the
at
box
that time
stuff.
when I thought I was going to ascend, I became a strict raw vegan. I had just a straight up raw food. I lost like 30 pounds. I'm like 180 now. Imagine me like 150. I was like a beanpole, thinking I was eating high vibe, and it all felt right at the time. It all seemed like the smart move at the time, but and then during that time I was sun gazing. I was doing anything I could to like crack me open. I was eating a lot of mushrooms at that time, and at that point is when I became very ungrounded and kind of on the crazy side. And luckily, I was humbled and kind of had to go make some money because I was out of money, and I had to go back into the real world and live a normal life, and that was the best thing for me. But yeah, I kind of went on like a to the extremes in terms of that, I would say.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you meant by the question, like that kind of
Yeah, yeah,
stuff?
yeah, 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 exactly. That's what, yeah, just wanted
Yeah. How
to.
about you?
Uh, weirdest. Because I kind of just wrote this before, so I haven't actually thought about the question for myself. I guess maybe Cambo is kind of the craziest thing that I've done.
Ah, okay,
I mean,
nice.
like you're literally burning holes in your in your skin and injecting this frog poison to purposely shit and throw up. So that's pretty
Yeah.
that's pretty nuts. I'm sure there's something else, but that's probably the one that's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
right on.
really
Yeah,
out,
same.
especially for
I
the
dig that
normie,
though. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't. I almost look at that as a positive thing. I'm a big fan of combo as well. I haven't done it in a little while, but the times I've done, it's been very helpful. I would say, in spite of what it looks like.
Yeah, yeah,
As you
yeah, yeah.
said, when you
For
described
me
it.
too, for me too. It's just like kind of crazy from like just the normie perspective kind of
Oh,
thing.
for
From
sure.
the outside, there are just certain things that you do that like you understand why you're doing it, and there's positive, obviously some benefits. You're not just doing
Yeah.
anything just because, but sometimes I look at out like I don't know, you kind of see like, man, imagine if someone was to walk in and see what I'm doing right now, like they would just must think we're fucking insane. Like especially certain
No.
psychedelic ceremonies, where it's like, man, we look like freaking like this crazy hippie pagan people worshiping the earth or whatever it is.
Yeah.
A lot of those kind of
It's
moments.
funny. Combo in particular, there was a couple times where I was in a big group and then like, the first half would go first and the second half would wait. And it was always interesting when you went second because you would just watch like, four or five people get the medicine on them.
Yep.
3 minutes later, one's throwing up, one is passed out. Everyone looks like they're 20 years older, looking like they're dead. And it's like, oh God, I wish I would have went first. But yeah, from the outside, it's like, why are we doing it? Why am I doing this?
Yeah, it actually helped because people resonate with different medicines and stuff. And for my wife, she actually found it that was the one out of all the different plant medicines to actually help her the most. Because she
Hmm.
had like this autoimmune disease, Graves' disease, and stuff like that. And the doctor was basically her specialist gave her two options: either you got to take a radioactive pill for the rest of your life until your thyroid falls out, or you got to surgically cut out your thyroid. And I was like, dude,
Wow.
no freaking way. There must be a different way. And of course, just through diet and mindset and all that kind of stuff. And then, boop, gone. And that was her
Wow.
specialist, right?
That's amazing, man. Yeah, my wife had a
It's
similar, not quite like that, but she didn't get her cycle for like 3 years, and then she
oh,
did
really?
combo, and it came back like a week later.
Wow.
So I've heard of such like almost miracles, like physical miracles from the combo medicine in particular. So that's cool. That's a great story. I like that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, because I noticed a lot of it can be like, just emotional trauma getting stored in the body, you know.
Seems
Uh,
like that. Yeah, for sure.
And I think even, I think kind of like even, psychology and modern science and stuff it is starting to be a little bit more kind of trippy in a sense, even with quantum physics and all that kind of stuff. Like if you were to
Hmm.
hear some scientists say what they're saying today, like 100 years ago, it sounds freaking insane. You know what I mean? Even
Yeah,
quantum physics sounds
absolutely.
freaking nutty. So
Yeah,
who knows where we're going to get? I think we're just still in the infancy stage. So it'll be interesting to see where we go. But
yeah.
yeah, man, thanks for coming on. I actually just before we finish this, I want to ask like how you got into like coaching and stuff like that. Like what inspired you to get into this career path and what helped you kind of grow your business?
Yeah, so prior to being on YouTube, I was a fitness trainer and I ran my own gym and, had
Mm.
like a boot camp basically in my own little studio. And that was like my first experience coaching. It was similar, you had to emotionally, literally coach them. And then once I started my YouTube channel, one of the first things I did was launch like digital courses. And then I had this one launch that went so poorly. I sold two, and I was needing the money, and it was like this whole dark night for me, basically financially. But that gave me the idea that people wanted to coach with me, and they were asking, "Hey, do you do sessions?" And I never really considered it because I was like, how am I going to coach you? I'm just like I'm just like a regular dude on YouTube. But I felt called to do it. I felt like inspired to do it, so I did. And then I did one-on-one coaching for quite a while. And then that transitioned into like running retreats, in-person retreats, and then group coaching. And now what I do mostly is like business coaching, or I help people grow a following and then monetize it if you're a coach or a healer, that kind of thing. So it just kind of happened naturally. Just it's always just following my inspiration basically in terms of that.
Nice, awesome. So you got like a retreat coming up, like you going to Costa Rica?
We're doing, we don't run, we organize plant medicine retreats in Costa Rica. And this one in particular in
Okay.
July, my wife is running. It's a women's one. But me and my friend Aaron, we are in Dowdy, we like promote them and fill them up. And then we have, medicine people that come and run the ceremonies. So we'll come in and drink one of the nights, but it's a women's ceremony, so we really can't be in there too much. So it's kind of a vacation for me and Aaron, and then my wife's running this retreat basically. But normally it's co-ed, and me and Aaron and Patty, my wife, we kind of, you know, host them together, you could say.
Oh, nice. How many times a year do you host these plant
We've
medicine
done them up
retreats?
to 3 times a year. Now we're doing about twice a year. It's like a lot to leave. I don't like leaving my kids for like 11 days at a time, 3 times a year. And um, so yeah, but twice a year currently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sweet, man.
Yeah.
Well, was there anything that you wanted to share before we leave or promote?
No, I want to say thank you. I was really flattered that you reached out to me, and I enjoyed our talk. And I think you're a really cool guy. I've watched some of your stuff, and I knew we'd get along. Just some of the things we're into. So just want to thank you for staying up late. I know you're probably ready to go to bed now, and I appreciate you having me on, man. It's a real honor, and I wish you well in life and in your business and everything.
Ah, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Yeah, same to you, man. I've always kind of appreciated the energy that you put out. I'm like, yeah, no, this guy seems pretty cool. I reckon we'd have a blast having a
Yeah,
conversation, delving deep into it. So who knows if you're up for it one day in the future, we can go for round two. Who knows? I'm sure
yeah.
there's many things to explore. But yeah, I guess
Yeah.
sleep time for me. But did you want to share any like kind of socials for people who want to connect with you?
Kind of like you, I'm taking a little break, but you can just find me on YouTube if you're interested.
Mm,
My name, Victor Oddo, or on Instagram, just under my name.
sweet. I'll leave all the
Yeah,
links in the description. But
cool,
awesome, brother.
awesome.
Much
Thank you, my
love.
friend.
All
Appreciate
the
it.
best to your family. And yeah, we'll keep up. What the hell?
Alrighty.
I just saw
It
balloons
happens
come up on my
sometimes on
little.
Zoom. I saw it
What
happens
the
once in a while. I don't know what the
what
hell
the
what that is.
fuck? Is that like just the AI? Just like, okay, they're wrapping up now, so let's put some celebration.
So I guess, yeah.
All right, man. All the
All right.
best. Talk
All right,
soon.
peace, bro.
Keep in
Take
touch.
care.
Okay. Bye bye.